a Buddha from Bihar that is currently in the National Gallery of Australia. And as per the records with them, they say it was presented by the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to them. And when we look at the minutes, official minutes of the trip, Indira Gandhi actually asked Australia to give her a koala bear in return.
Polar bears.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they refused it, saying it's a protected species.
Endangered species or something.
And here you're giving a 10th century Buddha to them, and
in return for in the expectation.
And even that was refused. But my question is, how come there was a Bihar ka Buddha inside the Prime Minister's plane? India for a long time did not care. These murtis should not go back to a museum or storage. They should go back to active worship. They should go back to being the gods that they once were. And that's why we go up by the hashtag Bring Our Gods Home. It was under Prime Minister Modi that this became an event. Okay, some people call it photo op, but it is a sign not just to the outside world, but also to his officers that the Prime Minister is showing importance in this, and it is of his interest. And that is the reason why officers of DRI, earlier they were interested in bullion or other smuggling. They know that now the Prime Minister's focus is on Murti Chori as well. So I think that is this is a big change that's happened on the ground. People are more receptive. India has become more forceful in its international approach, restoring national pride, saying that our murtis are not objects that you can plunder and sell.
I'm Ananya, and for this unique podcast episode, we are talking with Mr. Vijay Kumar. He is the man behind bringing back India's antiquities and artifacts from different parts of the world back to its home. He co-founded India Pride Project and has over the years worked with the government, international agencies, law enforcement agencies for bringing back India's cultural heritage home. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Hello, Mr. Vijay Kumar.
Thank you for having me here, and appreciate the support.
Okay, my first question. When I was reading about you, I thought you might be somebody who has grey hair and has worked at ASI for like decades, or is
Thank
a PhD.
God, no.
Thank God not, okay. Or is like a PhD scholar who's been reading about Indian art. And then I found out that you are trained as a CA and that you've been working at the shipping industry. I didn't know before the conversation that you're still a CEO of a shipping industry. My question to you is, very few people are able to pursue their passion. How do you explain this to me, that you are a day professional somewhere else and then with everything else you've managed?
My son says day job and night job and job 1 and job 2, and quite often he says which is a job 1, which is a job 2. Thankfully, as I said, the day job pays for all this at the start itself, because when I started this pursuit, there was never an intention to become a vigilante, as some of the museums now look at us. What started off was a journey of self-learning. I think I had enough of our history books. And
so were you like a history student growing up? No. Okay.
I was a very bad student in the sense that I was very good in marks. I had a photographic memory. So I would not study for 364 days. The last day I would study and pass off very well, good grades and decent. Always a last bencher. Active in sports, did a lot of other work, interested in arts and photography. So at some point, you could say that it's in the blood. My family hails from a small village south of Chennai, where my great-grandfathers were headmen, Munsif. And today, there are small temples built by them, small edifices, built by my grandfather that still stand today. Right. So that was as much as it was. But at some point of time, my grandmother introduced me to a work of historic fiction called Ponniyin Selvan in Tamil, which today the nation has seen. But I would still prefer the book version.
The book over the film.
Because it was written as a weekly for almost 5 years. So imagine, it was the teleseries of today then. And it talked about this great king, Rajaraja Chola. And that was like the moment when, because I've been to the big temple, the Tanjore big temple many times, and there's always been the sense of, you would say, deja vu. A lot of people feel it, but having been there, done there, somehow being a servant of the emperor. So that was the feeling where. And then when you read the book and you talked about this great king, which sadly not many know up north, brilliant administrator. I took a passion to study about Chola art,
Right.
which was sadly not even mentioned in our books.
This was when?
As a child, I remember drawing the big temple. That was my first expression, I would say class 6, class 7.
Yeah.
And then there's certain instances happened in my life wherein I was pushed into documenting or taking photography because I broke a few bones playing soccer. So my artwork stopped. So I moved to photography, and being in the shipping industry allowed me to travel across India and then across Southeast Asia. And I was quite surprised to see the Indic influence in Vietnam in the early 4th century. And I'm like, even now you go there, it's a boondocks place. Reaching there is tough. Speaking there is tough. How did our people travel here and all that? And that's real curiosity. And what started off, I started writing about my experiences, like not like a travelogue, not like a photo blog. And I'm talking in 2004-5. Started writing it in Google and Yahoo forums. And fate would have it, I moved to Singapore and I found 3 hours of my life because there was no traffic. Now you could just go and 10 minutes you're in your office. So I had 3 more hours of my life. And the second thing was at 6 o'clock, the office was empty, not like India. And at 9, the office opens, people come in. At 6, they go home. I'm like, okay, we are used to working like early morning. And so I had this space.
Extra slot.
Then I decided to spend more time and I picked Chola bronzes as my subject of study because that allowed me to do it remote, whereas epigraphy or something else. So I started seeing more and more of Chola bronzes, which incidentally I consider the high watermark of Indian art along with Gupta stone. So if you look at Indian art, for me, Chola bronzes and Gupta art, and so more you see, you get trained more. And I started reading more about what is published, and a lot of these books were written like PhD theses. More the authors wanting to show their knowledge and not aimed at the readers. So there was a need for let's say an abridged guide. And I said, I'm not going to publish any books. Never in my life I'm going to publish a book. And it turned otherwise. But then I said, let's make this a easier route. How a common man should look at Indic art.
Okay.
How do you go see a temple? How do you see an Ardhanarishwara? What are the aspects of it? And I started blogging about it. And again, everything offline.
So it started with a blog.
Started with a Google forum, a Yahoo forum, and somebody complained that I was clogging their email, sending too many photos. And as usual, there are 10 people who support one person. And credit to that person who opposed it. And I said, okay, I won't send anymore. And my friend who was in America, that time I met him after 4 years actually, registered my blog site, poetryinstone.in, and I started publishing.
Poetry in Stone, yes.
I started publishing bilingual posts in Tamil and English. And it went on for about a couple of years. In 2006, I had already done about 250 odd posts, and then the stock was over.
While working at the shipping industry.
And it became a fashion. As I said, you don't need much. I think a lot of people get tied up with work, and if you do quality work, I think 4 hours of work is more than enough to earn your daily keep.
Yeah.
And then your mind still stays fertile because you are using something else other than your day. So the stuff was over, and because of the blog site, I managed to get out to a lot more like-minded people across India, across the globe.
Connect with other like-minded.
Yeah, and I was very clear from day one that I would not make it commercial. We will not take any donations. We will not take any ads. Plus, we said we will not put watermark on our images. Who are we when the original sculptors themselves did not sign the work? Who are we to put watermarks on? So any scholar who at that time could not travel to India, they would ask us for photographs and we would give them. You want high resolution? Take it.
So these were like a group of volunteers who were clicking pictures of the actual idols in Indian temples.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was almost like an encyclopedia of...
We originally set up to do like a citizen-led archive, image archive. That was the original passion.
Okay.
So we would read about the site. We'll do about every 4 months, every 6 months. Every weekend we will get together, discuss. Each one of us will take different aspects. And then by the time we hit the site, we are already experts, bookish. And then when you go there, you get to see. And over the course of it, there was one site where we went and there was supposed to be a Varahi, which is one of the Saptamatrikas was supposed to be there, was not there.
This was an idol that you expected to be there in a temple, as per historical
published references.
Evidence. Yeah.
And this was just one example, the multiple examples. And that Murti was stolen. It was stolen. And in fact, we had gone in a large car and, and the local villagers thought we were smugglers and they came after us, which is quite good in that instant. But then this was very recent. When it was about 2007-8. So at that time when I started reading back about this trade, in the sense that, and this was across India, wherever we went, there'll be an empty niche and we ask them, it looks like something was removed recently. They'll say, oh, it's gone to the shed. So we go to the shed to photograph. They'll say, no, it's gone to the museum. Go to the museum. They'll say, no, it's not here. So there's something amiss, and we realized that something was amiss. And that was the time.
So you were going to like temples and not finding
what should have been there.
What should have been there. Okay.
And some of them told us, saying that there was one priest in a temple in Tamil Nadu, Sendamangalam. He said, during the cyclone, robbers came and took this Brahma away. And we were amazed because that temple is like a fortified temple. There's two walls, one is 10 feet, one is 14 feet tall. And this Murti would have weighed about 2.5 tons. Not something that you can just switch like. Yeah. So something was, an organized gang was targeting it. And at that time, we were also traveling on work around the world, and we used to see our Murtis in shop floors and art fairs coming out. And when we read about the international regulations, India and Italy actually campaigned.
India and Italy campaigned
because the purchasing nations look at a few states as source nations, like we are some mine or something. So Egypt, Italy, Greece, India,
whichever
Nepal,
had old civilizational heritage.
So they look at us as source nations, and we are being subject to plunder. Colonial period, post-colonial period and all that. So India and Italy actually presented a paper, and India's paper is quite important there, where they have documented from the 1920s, state-wise, how many Murtis have gone, and you're talking numbers going up to 4 digits at that time itself, yearly. So the data was available at that point of time itself.
At the time that British were here, and how many Murtis are being stolen and taken away. Yeah.
So, and the UN, sadly, was as toothless as it is today. Couldn't bring in a regulation which was retrospective, but at least they came up with the 1970 convention, which said, henceforth, if anything is stolen, if you can prove that it was stolen after 1970, and if both the countries are signatories, you don't have to go to court. You just go, stake your claim. The other country has 30 days to refute your claim. Otherwise, the idol is forfeit to India.
So, in effect, it means कि अगर India से कोई मूर्ति, suppose some Britisher took it away in 1930s, UN resolution is not going to protect that. Like you can't stake claim.
You cannot stake claim, but the resolution says use the spirit, letter and spirit, you be good, something like that. Okay. But going back to common law. So this is basically avoiding the legal litigation process. But we have to apply common law. Common law clearly states that a thief does not pass good title. Meaning, if you have bought a stolen property, you will never get the title. You might have possession and ownership. So India has to litigate for that. That is for the colonial period.
Like legally prove that this was taken away.
It was stolen away.
It was stolen away.
And then you have the colonial period. The colonial period is a tamasha because narrative is being set initially. Like I give you a few examples. So there was this Danish colony in south of India, Trankebar. He gets a 2-year lease from a local king to build a fort, a trading fort. As he is digging for the fort, he stumbles on a buried hoard of 30 bronzes. And here I have to explain what buried hoards is. Because a lot of people don't understand what buried hoards is. All over India, we get every year, if you look at the papers, you will say idol found in pond, lake, while digging, construction, ye murti mila. Now, why were these murtis buried? These murtis were buried for safety. The agamas basically prescribe that when there is a hostile force coming, if there are metal icons, they might melt it. If it is stone, they might mutilate it. So what you do, you basically transfer the power to the Salavriksha. So take this murti, dig a pit, line it with charcoal, and then kusha grass, face down, the murtis are buried, and then sand and put on top of it. If you don't have time, then you throw it in a lake or a pond or a temple and all that. So these were prescribed to safeguard, and incidentally, this is all the way you find examples of this burial till Vietnam. So in Vietnam, there's a murti that was buried for safety when there was a Chinese invasion. So this goes across. But the question is, so imagine the context. So you have a invading horde coming, and what would your natural reaction would be? To take your stuff, possessions, take your children and run away. But our forefathers, our ancestors took the time and effort to protect the murtis in the face of possibly death. And why I say death is that, okay, they took so much effort to bury the murtis. And here we are not talking just about Hindu murtis, we are talking Jain murtis, Buddhist murtis have been buried for safety. For some reason, not all of them were brought back to worship. Why would somebody go through this enormous process to bury them? And why would they not come back to worship? Only two options. One, they were driven away, or they were killed. Because people did not know where it was buried. And both of them, the first option doesn't make sense because the threats normally were for 3 months, 6 months.
The threats?
The invading force occupied the, they were, so this is the concept of buried horde. So the buried horde were done under this tremendous threat by our ancestors to safeguard the murti with the hope that someday they will come back to worship and they'll become the gods that they once were. Now imagine this Danish collector Peter Anker finds his 30 bronzes. The Brahmins are crying to him saying, give it back to us. And he says these have lost power. There is no temple nearby that can take this, which is false, because today if you go to the Danish fort, stand on top of it, within 500 meters there is a Chola, a 1,000-year-old temple standing there. On top of it, he takes this 8 murtis and other puja items, sells it to the Prince of Denmark, who then becomes the king, and now they are in the Royal Museum in Denmark, saying, I bought it from the locals. Now if you look at the original Danish records, he gave the locals a bag of rice and some betel nuts. And we have the same case in Karnataka. About 80 sculptures were taken away from Hoysala Chalukyaras by Loventhal, a Jesuit priest, by giving them a pair of spectacles.
Wow. Okay.
And we have a case of a British resident in Calcutta going on an early morning fishing expedition to get oysters. So he's sick of having, I think, he wants to have fresh oysters. He lands on this very, very important island where there is a ruined Vishnuka temple. And he brings this murti back and takes it back to London. It's currently in the UK. In Coimbatore, there's a temple where a buried bronze comes up, Vishnu, Sridevi, Bhudevi. The locals bid for it. They bid 1,000 rupees in 1890s, which is a princely sum. And they are outbid by Lord Curzon, the Viceroy of India. Lord Curzon takes this and bequeaths it to the V&A, whereas the temple still stands in Coimbatore, bereft of its deities, where this is inside a glass case with a footnote saying, found as a buried hoard in Coimbatore, bequeathed by Lord Curzon to the V&A. They can actually come back. I think the V&A should be magnanimous. Okay, it is colonial loot and plunder. So this is the colonial, this is how you gave the context on the colonial loot and plunder. You said currently there is no UN regulation whatsoever in terms of, saying that there is some sort of a treaty or agreement or convention where, say, India can stake claim to the colonial plunder. Yes.
What happened after 1947? Did this, the British went away, but, based on the data that we read, this plunder, if not by the British, sort of continued.
Till about 4 years ago, colonial loot was untouchable. France actually has a Napoleonic era law that states anything that enters France cannot go out, even if it's stolen. And that still stays. But now, after Black Lives Matter, all of that is changing. And the world is beginning to realize that this is plunder. That is number one. And our case, for example, India for a long time did not care. I say long time did not care. When you say from independence to 1970, 1970 is quite crucial with the abolition of the privy purses. There was a flight of artifacts, not just deities, that left India as well because of why the royals...
The royal princely states coming down.
So, India was losing lot more. compared to Italy. And when I say a lot more, not in quantity, Italy was actually tomb raiders. So they were digging up tombs. So Italy had this Etruscan vases, earthenware vases that were buried in tombs. And that was targeted by thieves, along with paintings and all. The majority was Etruscan vases. And when I say vases, they can go up to $1 million in the international market. These are craters, wine. Now the question is, that's a civilization. The Etruscans lived 2,200 years ago. 2,000 years ago, they were gone. Now you're talking about India, which is a living civilization. And our Murtis have been in continuous worship for almost 1,000 to 1,500 years. So there is a subtle difference between these two. Retrieving tomb property, Egypt. When I say, I'm just looking context. I'm not talking about the theft is a theft. The legality is the same, but the context is much more. This is an object of faith. And this was never intended to be art. And lastly, the way Europe looks at Holocaust art. For example, we all talk about the monuments men, Hitler going after arts everywhere and stealing it. And today there are commissions where the Jews are going after rich museums that are giving back. And when there is a Holocaust claim with atrocities committed, kids' gloves, they just give it back quietly. Whereas when India asks for it, people don't associate the same kind of illegality and the horrors because people don't realize the horrors that India went through under the colonial rule. It was really bad. And we're talking about people who did not even have a meal a day. And we have cases where smugglers are trying to give them like 20 rupees.
And then just taking away the,
So
this is very, I think, very important context to know. And you spoke about how, I think the point you're making was how Indian plunder during the colonial era is not looked upon as plunder.
This is similar to wildlife trafficking. Okay. Wildlife trafficking, you have these horror visuals of rhinos and dead elephants and all that. People don't associate the same thing with illicit trafficking of antiquities. In both cases, the killing stops when the buying stops. So the plunder will stop when the buying stops. But people don't realize that there is in Calcutta museum, there was a whistleblower who talked about people, thefts happening in museum. He went out for tea, has not come back for 5 years now. There are at least 7 guardians who have been killed, temple guardians who have been killed during thefts happening. There is a case of a Nataraja, the villain of my book, Subhash Kapoor, related in Parvur, where the Nataraja's hand was sawn. They cut the Nataraja's hand, melted it to find if it had gold. The jeweler who did it was in Coimbatore. He didn't find any gold because obviously in Hindu tradition we have the Panchaloka. In the Jain tradition we have the Ashtadhatu. The gold and silver are ceremonial. It's 0.01%. You don't find literally. So the jeweler said there's no gold. So the robbers hit him and he died. So this was in 2005. There's a murder case. Interestingly, this hand-cut Nataraja leaves India via Nepal into Hong Kong, from Hong Kong to London. London, there's a restorer, Neil Perry Smith. We can name him now because he's been charged and extradited to the US. Makes a new hand for it and it goes to Subhash Kapoor, who's a gallery, Art of the Past, catalog in September 2008. Displayed it for 3.5 million. And a month before Kapoor is arrested in Germany in September 2011, it quietly comes back to Chennai. And Deenadayalan, who was his main supplier, who had local police on his payroll, quietly gives us back to close the case. So imagine a Nataraja leaving. So that's how porous our borders are.
So we've spoken about the colonial era. We've also spoken about global context in terms of how do we see or not see the plunder and the loot around Indian artifacts. And I think I should not even call them artifacts. I think murtis mean much more. Coming to post-independent India, I was reading some data that since 1947, I mean, you typically expect that, once you have an Indian government, there will be greater understanding and sensitivity and preservation of our heritage. But I read that between 1947 to 2010 or 15, like until that era, less than 20 or 25 artifacts.
The CAG report of 2013 lists this from 1970. There's no data prior to 1947. They have documented data from 1970 to 2000. India brought back 19. 19.
19.
2000 to 2012 was zero.
No artifacts
No
brought
artifacts
back.
were brought back. It's very interesting period. But
Okay.
I want to draw comparison to Italy. During the same period, we started the race together. Italy set up a national art crime squad comprising best of their police force, equipped them with the best. They brought back 1,70,000 objects.
And between 2000 to
19.
2012, no artifact
No
was
artifacts.
retrieved.
And it was during this period, in 1998, that two things happened. One, there was exposed by a British journalist on Sotheby's, the world's #1 auction house, where he wrote a book also called Sotheby's Inside Story. There's one chapter on India. So he exposed 3 networks. He actually came to India. And in Bombay, this smuggler says, "Do you want the Taj Mahal? Let me know. I'll ship it out in parts to you." Knowing the others, okay. He also exposed another smuggler in Rajasthan called Vaman Gia. So Vaman Gia set up 4 Swiss companies, and he is said to have exported or smuggled 10,000 objects of art from 1970 to 2000 via a host of 4 or 5 Swiss companies to be sold by auction houses in London. Vaman was arrested in 2003 by Rajasthan Police Force. In 2013, he was acquitted for want of evidence. Not even one of the so-called 10,000 objects came back.
This was the era. So tell me, like, I have a question here. What you're saying, only 19 artifacts up till 2013 as per a CAG report even came back, and then you're talking about an interesting era between 2000 to 2013. You gave an example of how a smuggler who could have been...
The rot was so bad that imagine in 2005, hearing about Vaman's arrest, a guy who bought a Shivka Murti in London hands over the Murti to the Indian High Commission
Okay.
in 2005. That news is not passed to India. In 2018, we are doing a restitution of another Buddha that we will talk about later, and it's in India House. And in the background, as a showpiece, is this Nataraja which we have been searching for, which is actually inside the Indian High Commission for the last
So many
14 years, when the evidence was sitting inside. And because...
So tell me, like, what was... my question is, we can still, I mean, we've seen all those 70s, 80s ka movies, right? You can imagine smugglers and we'll talk about the Subhash Kapoor case and these rackets. But what was the government doing? Like, I want to know what has been the role of government before 2014, and you've been talking about the CAG 2013 report. From 1947 to 2013, what role did government play or not play to have a situation like this?
For a long time, I think we were fed lies saying, "Itna kuch nahi ho raha hai." Even in parliament floor, it was said that we are losing 5 or 10 only, nothing is going. So in fact, in my home state of Tamil Nadu, in the Madras Museum has been robbed 7 times. It's been broken. It's been broken into 7 times in the last, say, 25 years. The only thing that is reported lost is they are saying a fake replica coin. So this is what has been fed. Okay. Now the question is, in the past, what was the importance given to this, and who were in charge? In the sense that the ASI is, if you really look at it, they are the Archaeological Survey of India. They should have been doing only excavation.
Right.
Now today they are focused on retrieval, whereas retrieval is probably connected to law enforcement. So ASI does not have proper law enforcement. And for a long time, we have lost even stupid cases, clear cases, having the best of legal brains because of problem of scholarship. Now, not to boast, but today, me and my team have probably covered almost entire Southeast Asia and India. The reason being, if you show me an object, India is so wide and diverse. Like every 200 kilometers, not only the foot clothes, the style also changes to the icon, the material. And every 100 years, that also changes. So today, if you show us a murti, based on the stone, I can tell you this is Bihar, this dynasty. This is even among Chola bronzes.
What era or what?
Even in Tamil Nadu bronzes, you have early Pallava bronzes, Chola bronzes, Pandya bronzes, every dynasty, every 100 years. And that kind of scholarship, I'm not saying it's with me, it's with my team. And today, and that is what is being respected by law enforcement worldwide, saying,
Right.
look, if we send these guys something, I do a border check, I can tell them this is not from India, this is from Afghanistan, this is from Pakistan, this is from Sri Lanka.
So this is
That
scholarship and the
that kind
documentation.
of intelligence was not found in the ASI.
Okay.
And they did not build the capability. And
And what about the government leadership in this? You've written about one.
so there was two examples that we can talk about.
Okay.
I know what you're leading me to. So one is Nehru ka aide. He was Nehru's advisor. He quits and for some reason goes to US and starts a antique dealership. And like, of all the jobs, why would you start an antique dealership in the US? Especially when, okay, that is one part. The other interesting thing which I'm still not able to solve is this case of a Buddha from Bihar that is currently in the National Gallery of Australia. And as per the records with them, they say it was presented by the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to them. And when we look at the official minutes of the trip, Indira Gandhi actually asked Australia to give her a koala bear in return.
Polar bear.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they refused it, saying it's a protected species.
Endangered species or something.
And here you're giving a 10th century Buddha to them. And
in return for like, or in the
and even that was
expectation.
refused. But my question is, how come there was a Bihar ka Buddha inside the Prime Minister's plane?
Right. At first place.
That's a question that I've not found answers. Also, I've come across 3 cover-ups, massive cover-ups. So we're talking about this 19 data from 1972. So in 1985, a raid happens in London, Scotland Yard. Tamil Nadu Police, the Central, all of them travel to London. They raid a gallery called Emerald Art Gallery.
Okay.
They seize over 144 objects.
Wow.
And they go to the owner's house, Chabria. They find 40 objects. So overall, about 200 objects are seized.
Which are retrieved. Not retrieved, but yes,
as
seized.
per India Today dated article that still exists online now.
Okay.
And they take a priest from Tamil Nadu and he says, I recognize this idol as a mother would recognize a son. So he says this idol is from me, from my temple. And that gallery had sold a Nataraja to the Kimball Museum in USA. Only that Nataraja came back to India. Nobody knows what happened to this 244 odd seizures.
But these were seized by the government, Indian government.
The files are missing in India, the files are missing in the UK. Then, a couple of years later, there is a seizure in Hague, a shipment from Tuticorin of a Delhi lady, 200 odd small items and another 600. So 800 objects are held up. The headline in a paper again says CBI man in Hague to negotiate the return. And then we don't know what happened to that. So these are cases where classic, we could have done more. So colonial loot, we never bothered. Even after that, things were going.
But this is almost like, maybe not the top leadership, but within the government, at least there must have been complicit.
And we've been fighting. I presented a paper in 2008 talking about my estimates because when I studied this, when I said the tap is closed in 1970, but water was still flowing the other side. So how is this happening? So when I studied this, I went up and looked at the closest to the how were the Italians successful?
Okay.
Whereas where we lost.
What has worked? Yeah.
So for them, the modus operandi, like me, the robbers also studying. So they actually took the Italian model. The Italians, as they were excavating, they were taking photos. They were building a portfolio. So these are called robber offering photos. So as fresh off the ground, there will be a photo. Clean, there will be a photo. On the shop floor will be a photo. In the museum. So like yesterday marriage brokers, these were idle brokers who were building a portfolio of...
Right.
The same was being done by Indian suppliers where they had gone to social media. So they were offering freshly excavated objects or freshly looted objects, some of them with dhotis in the background, lungis in the background showing that they've just plundered it. Some of them still incrustation, sand is there. 2 dealers worldwide, and bidding war was going on. And this was happening in 2004-5. So as recently as that. And the numbers that we're talking about, a lot of people say, Vijay, don't talk about money. I do understand that my Murtis are priceless, but we need to understand the commerce behind it. The most expensive idol that I'm currently working on is with another scholar, Dr. Kirat Mankode in Bombay. We tracked a Yakshi from Barhut in central India, UP. She was registered antiquity by a farmer, Kuladevata. The robbers, in 1978, registered it. The robbers actually robbed it in 2004. They've cut her into 3 pieces so that they can export it. In the US, they stitched it back. And she was in the market for $15 million.
My God.
So when she comes back, it's already seized. So when she comes back, she will be the most expensive object, restituted object in the history of the world.
Oh my God. Okay.
And we are talking about Chola bronzes that we have brought back worth $5.6 million. Now, you look at $5.65 million, like we talked about Kapoor. Kapoor's holding stock. So we worked with US Homeland Security. It was very good.
So for a lot of listeners
Yeah.
who may not know the Kapoor legacy, tell us a bit about that.
So
in brief.
Kapoor is an interesting guy. His family was in Pakistan, moved to Delhi. He studied in DAV. As a child, his father was in the antiquity business.
Okay.
He's actually charged in a case of a Vishnu Murti theft in 1972. But the wheels of justice moved slowly. The case came up only in 1993, by which time the family had already emigrated to America and taken US passports. Kapoor, when he was a child, was I think there was some problem. So he was kidnapped, and the kidnapper bit part of his right ear off, and then he was safely brought back. So it's a murky world. So the entire family, his father, mother, brother, sister, all move. He comes back, gets married in 1975, goes to America, and starts very small way a gallery in Madison, and then he gets in touch with a few celebrated Lotus awarded scholars who put him in touch with museums around the world. And one of these celebrated scholars is actually the reason why India lost a lot of statues in the 1960s and 70s. He actively advised Hollywood, Bollywood, like that, celebrities to buy and donate to museums. There's another racket going on. Kapoor basically gets into this business in a big way from 1994. And in 2004, he looks at South India in a big way, gets into association with Sanjeevi Ashokan and the island, his main suppliers. So about 38 people gang works wherein they show him objects and he says, yes, let's go, take it. And this is a modus operandi that he picks from reading Vamangiya. So Swathibi's executives used to come to India on recce trips with Vamangiya's team, with scholars guiding them to temples in Mount Abu, Rajasthan, where they would say, this will sell, this will not sell, this will not. So this was not some random theft. This was an organized looting on an industrial scale where Indian art objects or deities were prized and then it was stolen. The same thing happened with Kapoor's team in India. They would go to these temples with very small footfalls. And then
with less security.
And they would take it. And they were actually emboldened by the law or the lack of it. So on one side, you succeed in, and not only temples, they also had a network to go after buried hoards. So we have a lot of Tirthankaras that they managed to get out of India, buried hoards. So here you have a network of robbers who are basically stealing. If they get caught, they were getting away with 3 months because the IPC section 380, which is what is being used for heritage crimes, is actually section for housebreaking theft. And housebreaking theft, minimum penalty is 3 months, maximum penalty is 7 years. And no setting hota hai, so these guys were getting away. What I understand in Tamil Nadu is that out of good intention, somebody wanted to amend this act to introduce a state amendment to say that temple theft should be minimum 3 years. But it was lost in translation. When they put up the amendment, they left out the word minimum. So today in Tamil Nadu, you rob a house, it's 7 years. You rob a temple, it's 3 years. And that's the reason why Subhash Kapoor. So Kapoor's story gets interesting. So he divorces his wife. So he has girlfriends all over the world. So he has one girlfriend in New York, one girlfriend in Singapore who starts fighting with him because she's also an art dealer. And they actually go to court and they fight, and the Singapore court rules in Kapoor's favor. So a jilted lover who's suffered financial, so she starts bitching about him on online forums and telling information. Parallelly, there's another scholar, Damien Huffer in Australia, who's talking about a lot of museum purchases from Subhash Kapoor. He's threatened by Kapoor, and all this is happening parallelly. And in Tamil Nadu, after the spate of thefts in this 1985, they create a specific art crime squad called the Idol Wing, which is supposed to have 900 strong people. By 2008, it had 9 guys. But they had one person, unfortunately, he passed 3 days ago. So he was the person who basically was actively following a few leads. And as, let's say, destiny would have it, there was a truck stop that happened. Somebody was driving a truck and routine stop, and this guy just left the truck and bolted. If he had just stopped, nothing would have happened. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
So they caught him in Kerala.
Shak ho gaya. Huh.
So the guy blurted out saying, from the time I stole this Murti, bad luck, my truck is getting this, that, then all that. It was a very small Ganesha that he had in the truck. And then he said, I robbed this temple.
And he was part of Subhash Kapoor's gang.
Not Sanjeevi Ashokan's gang. And it never led to Subhash Kapoor.
Okay.
So Sanjeevi Ashokan again was politically connected. He had a lot of connections. He used to go from state to state, Kerala here. So he was arrested in 2009 on an early morning raid by Tamil Nadu police in a hotel in Cochin at 6 a.m. Imagine at 6 a.m. you pick somebody up along with all data. And after the laptop comes into custody of the police, it gets erased. And they send it to National Informatics, Delhi, and they can't. So obviously there was a mole within the department who was trying to not link the next step. So Sanjeevi Ashokan was on the ground. So parallelly, Homeland Security investigation.
Yeah, more than the mole, it also shows the intention of the government ecosystem at large. Like if that's not the priority.
It's actually worse. In 2006, a container of antiquities goes from Bombay. DRA calls, lets it go and says, catch it in America. They catch it in America, but a call goes to Kapoor and says, you're under watch, don't take this cargo. He abandons this cargo. And this container full of antiquities worth 20 million stays in New York till 2009 for 3 years, and he's still trading, still traveling, when we already knew that this was happening. So that was the ecosystem.
It has to be hand in glove with those in the government then. Yeah.
So end of the day, 2012, New York Homeland Security, I can't name him now, but I call him Indy as a tribute to Indiana Jones. So Kapoor's gallery was raided. Along with it, 14 surgery locations were raided. And that was when the magnitude of the loot. So this guy was in business for 35 years. He's holding stock in known locations. Afterwards, we found 3 or 4 more godowns, valued at $108 million. 2,622 objects, of which about 80% were for India, some to Nepal, some to Cambodia, was seized. And this was just as unsold stock.
And this was done by Homeland Security. It wasn't like Indian agencies there intention.
$108 million is about 900 crores. And this was a mid-sized dealer operating out of one shop in Manhattan.
Oh my God. Okay. With a heavy heart, let's go beyond 2013. Actually, before we go beyond 2013, tell us quickly about India Pride Project. Like, how does that work?
So, after Poetry in Stone, after
Which was
all
a
this
blog
blog,
about,
so we had this core team of people, friends, who said, let's go track this. So again, the same principle, we said we will not apply for any awards, we will not apply for any rewards.
No commercial,
and we will not seek any, because the problem was we were approached by a lot of people to fund it, but including prestigious institutions in the US saying we will fund your research and all that. But then it was always linked to some catch. We knew, in fact, I was in a prestigious US institution for a UN conference in 2016, wherein they introduced me in dinner to one of their main sponsors. So I told him, look, you have stolen art, you're going to return it. Like, no, then 3 years later it happened. About 22 objects were handed over by, let me name it, Yale. So we are currently working on a lot of things. So once we started forming this core, we decided to spread the social media from the investigation part. So social media awareness is different. Investigation was different. And we started identifying what the problems were. The problem was that we were not monitoring the sale. We were not monitoring the acquisitions. So for the monitoring the sales, we came up with a scheme where a lot of people, when they looked at our work, said, we want to contribute. We said, look, you buy old books, keep the book with you, scan the book to us.
Okay.
You buy old catalogs, keep the catalog with you, scan the catalog to us. You go to libraries, pick up old auction catalogs, scan the catalogs to us. So on one side, we are building a knowledge archive of what. So we've gone back to 1940s, 1930s of Indian objects being offered for sale, smuggled objects, obviously. So we're building up an image archive and then linking it to dealers. So then we look at, like, there's somebody called Kerkovian, then there's C.T. Lu, Dubry also, each dealers, and what we track those objects. On the same side, we start looking at old published books. So we had, like, for example, a 1914 book which had one small photograph of a Somaskanda, bronze Somaskanda, Shiva Parvati Skanda. And it said Sivan Kodal Somaskanda. That's it. Nothing else. There was no reference in the book. Just a block of photograph with it. And I knew that bronze was in Singapore. So we would need to find out where Sivan Kodal was. We go on social media. And that time was then we migrated from Yahoo, Google to Facebook. So we go on Facebook and says, hey, anybody knows Sivan? Then it just gets amplified. And my friend's driver said, near my village in Sri Marapattu, there is this small village called Sivan Kodal. We go there. My team goes there and says, is there an old temple here? No, there's no old temple, but some ruin near the tank. We go there. There is a 10th century temple, ruined temple there, and we go inside, literally, Indiana Jones style, snakes crawling over you, thorny bushes and all that. And we open it, there is a secret room, we call it Nelavara, which is basically underground, from where these idols were stolen. So today the temple has been declared a state monument, it's been reformed. So the temple is ready to receive the bronze. We are still fighting the case with Singapore to bring it back. So these are things that we are trying to do. A lot of this happens because volunteers go out and spread the word saying that, look, if anything is lost, reach out to us, we will find it for you. Because people are scared to go to the cops. They're scared that there will be questions asked, whether some of them, the perpetrators of the crime are still there. It could be a village headman who was very powerful. So they come out to us. And even in law enforcement, like, unfortunately, many of our police stations are judged by open FIRs. So if your police station is an open FIR, it's like a black mark. So what they do, I'm not talking about just Tamil Nadu. Across India, we have seen these cases where temple chori, which they can't close. So what they do, petty crime, you get one guy and say, this guy has robbed these 8 temples, idols not found, punishment 3 months, 6 months. And idols not found, they close the FIR. And this record does not reach back. So the fact that this temple has been robbed and an FIR has been filed is not centrally registered anywhere. And this was so shocking that in 2013 we found a case of a village stolen from the place where Kapoor's Murti was stolen. So they had closed the case within 8 months. But we managed to find that Hanuman in a sale in the US. So that way we are working with volunteers on the ground. Plus, we are also trying to put out word. So what we do is we do themed weeks on focused groups. So we have bronzes of specific groups of bronzes.
So that you're also spreading awareness and people know what
Not really. We say, so over the last, so from 2007, what we did is, thanks to the tech boom, today every city in the world has somebody Indian there. So we say Shiva week, Buddha week. So these guys are encouraged to take photos in the local museums or sale, and they put it on our site. So for a few Facebook likes and beautiful shots, I have collected the largest dispersed Indian art archive free of charge on Facebook. So today you tell me any museum in the world, I know what Indian art they have.
It's like a citizen-led repository, crowdsourcing.
So on one part, we know where the Murtis have gone, they have landed. On one part, we know who sold it, because once we match the auction catalogs, now the crucial piece is from where they could have been stolen. So then we go back stylistically, which belt, and then we put our volunteers to go on the site down and ask them, hey, anything is stolen from here, anything is stolen from there. The reverse also happens. Like in London, there was a Rama, Lakshmana and Sita ka Murti. So one of our volunteers was visiting, he was in a street, and by luck, the main gallery owner's door opened and there was a Ramaka Murti inside, and this guy got a shot. It was not for sale, it was in his private study. And he sent it to me. It was a very grainy photograph, obviously, but it was not a Chola bronze. It was a Vijayanagara bronze, which is like about 300 years later, 15th century. But it was one of the most beautiful bronzes I've seen. So about couple of years, I was searching for a Rama Lakshmana Murti which was lost one of the set. So normally, when you look at the set, especially in South India, Rama Lakshmana are identical. Only the size will be smaller. So if you have a single Murti, you don't know whether it's Rama or Lakshmana. If you both of them together, then Rama is higher, Lakshmana. So I was searching for one Rama Lakshmana missing in the group. Couldn't find. So 2 years later, I go and look around and same thing happens. I wait, get a shot, lucky shot. But now the crown is slightly different. I realize that there's a small knob on top of the crown. And I'm like, this is not the same. We go back. So that means this guy both has the Rama and Lakshmana. So then we go and search for entire set. And that style, we get a lead that in the Madras Museum, they replace from storage. That was from a belt very down south called Karaikal. So we go searching for Ramaka temple in Karaikal. There's no temple. So we are going, and then they say there's this beautiful Hanuman ka Murti, very special Trinetra Hanuman temple. We go there. Then we realize that it was actually a Rama temple. The bronzes were stolen in 1978. The public had forgotten that it was a Rama temple. Now it is called a Hanuman temple. So that's why it was not featuring. So 3 years we were searching for Rama Murti. And then this old man walks up, priest, and says, yes, sir. 1978, during my watch, it was stolen. Showing photograph, it says it is the same. So we find the old pictures. We give the proof to Indian High Commission and Metropolitan Police. They go, give it to the dealer. And the dealer said, I am a good faith purchaser, but since you've proven it is stolen, I want to give it back. So he gave it back on August 15th of 2018. These three were handed over to Indian High Commission in a ceremony. But unfortunately, the Hanuman of this group is in Singapore. And he's still not come back. But the London temple priest came. They had a paper mache Hanuman in front just to complete the set. And 2 years ago, the Murti came back to Anandamangalam. And the whole village, 14,000 people turned up to receive the Murti. And in fact, I was in Singapore at that time when one of the villagers who was settled in Singapore came with me and said, show us the Hanuman. So I took them and showed the Hanuman, and she started crying. The lady started crying. I asked why. My daughter is named after this deity. And that's when you realize how deep the faith is. So a lot of these volunteer groups are coming up. Priests are coming up. So we managed to get a Nataraja from Pune Nallur, wherein the priest complained to us saying that in 1971, our Murti was stolen. They gave us a replacement Murti in 1972 to close the case. But I want to find, we managed to find a photo studio that had taken the photo in Tanjore that still run, and the son gave us a photograph of the original Murti. We tracked it in New York when Prime Minister Modi went there 2 years ago. This Murti came back and he's gone back to worship. I'll end with one last story. There was this Murti that I was searching for a long time. It was one of the Shaivites in Samandir that was stolen in 1967, which was quite tough because it was before the UN convention. So we worked with the French Institute in Pondicherry very closely because they documented about 10% of Tamil Nadu South Indian temples, and we used that archive extensively to find matches. So when we did this match of the Adhanarishwara from Vruddhachalam and Sri Purandan, which Tony Abbott, the Australian Premier, gave to Prime Minister Modi in 2014, Prime Minister Modi and Francois Mitterrand, the French Premier, published a book, Shadow of the Gods, by the French Institute on how their archive is helping. And in that archive was the Samandar, which was in National Gallery of Australia. So we managed to tag it. We went down, and then we didn't know which temple it was. And the priest now is 75 years old. It was stolen during his father's time. And the father is no longer there. So last year, the Murti came back and ceremonially handed over to the priest by Kumbakonam High Court. And the priest said, I want to get it from Vijay. So when we handed over to him, he hugged it and said, as a boy, I had watched my father bathe this icon. And he literally hugged the deity and kissed it. And that to us is payday. And that is why we do all this, to say that these Murtis should not go back to a museum or storage. They should go back to active worship. They should go back to being the gods that they once were. And that's why we go up by the hashtag Bring Our Gods Home.
Bring our gods home. Yes, and I think the point you're also sort of subtly making is, at least for Indians, it's not just about a sculpture, it's not about an art form. These murtis are really divine, how we see the divine manifestation of God. It's a more living.
I think we've been trained not to see this, and that is where it's shocking for me. So imagine on the road you're traveling, somebody flicks your phone or your wallet or your chain. What happens? You get together, and here somebody is robbing your gods and then proudly displaying it, not just in museums. And people don't realize a lot of these stone ka murtis, you have the hand card, leg card. That is because for transport, because they are anchored to the base. So easily to get them out of the temples, they chop off the legs. So you go and see it in museums. These questions we should be asking.
Yeah.
And the next stage is that sense of hurt doesn't come, as I said, like in wildlife. I have seen our murtis, hardly 3-4% end up in museums. The rest of it goes to private collectors. I've seen our murtis that once stood in our temples in. It's very hard to explain, inside indoor swimming pools of the rich and famous as garden furniture, declared as garden furniture. A Mahishasura Mardani or a Nandi sitting as a garden furniture in a farmhouse, adorning a dining table of a party where our murtis are sitting there. As the door opens, this rich collector has the Somaskanda murti as a showpiece curio. And they were never meant to be that. And people have to understand that the original creators never intended them to be as pieces of art. Yes, that we see them as art is incidental, and that they made these so beautiful. Like I blogged when I first saw bronze in Singapore, which was again the Uma that was stolen from Sri Then I didn't know it was stolen. I was there when the museum acquired it, and I blogged, said, she came to life, I became metal. And that was the impact of seeing a Chola bronze in person. But then when, I don't know, for some reason, this was in 2006, every 6 months, somebody or other would come, I would take them to see this bronze. And my wife was like, what, next season come to go and see her? You go. And it was like she was calling out to say that, help me go back. And it was a very stupid mistake done by, not my team, by the law enforcement. When they published what was to be found, they did it in PDF, resized the bronze. So it was out of proportion.
Okay.
So one of our friends, again, contributors, who's a lady in the US, I call her Kay. She basically sent me paper cuttings of catalogs of Kapoor. And I'm sitting in Singapore taking these cuttings and documenting them. And me and my son are there. He's putting it on the ground. I'm taking the photos and I put this. And that's when we tied it up. And in 2015, she also came back to India.
Okay. So we have spoken about the gloomy past. We've spoken about how it was in the colonial period, which, as you mentioned, is an unfinished project. To even see that as plunder, and at least in the Indian context, and what more needs to be done to bring that back. And then we've also spoken about apathy, possibly complicity, between 1947 to up to the 2013, this era, which you substantiated with numbers from the CAG report. What did you say? Less than 50?
19 from 1970 to 2012.
19.
After that, After that, two things happened. One thing is, of course, we got a much more receptive government in India, and the US realized that the networks that were smuggling these into the US this was not some random thefts, and they realized that the same networks were bringing artifacts from Syria, the same networks were bringing artifacts from Iraq.
Okay.
And there was satellite imagery that showed that ISIS and Al-Qaeda were profiting from sale of digging licenses, meaning you have in Syria, again, a lot of things not excavated yet. So you find the previous photo, before, after photograph, before, nothing, and after it's like a golf ball, potch marks, each of it being a dig. So it's all plotted out, and ISIS was selling out digging licenses. And a graphic was shown in US Congress saying an artifact sells for $50,000. How many guns can it buy? How many bullets can it buy? How many bombs? And that's when they realized that this was harming their forces in 2009, that the US change the view. It's not some benevolent, general thing that we should be champions of culture. That is one.
Okay.
And a few good officers, like there's Colonel Matthew Bogdanos, the New York Deputy District Attorney, who's come, who are doing this.
Yeah.
Europe and the EU looked at it as a financial crime because this same money was used for money laundering. It was also used for tax evasion. And there are schemes where you gift an amount, an idol to the museum, you get tax breaks, and you set up the valuer. The valuer will place a higher number because the museum is getting it free. So a lot of these things are there. After the Panama Papers, for example, you don't want to keep money in the bank, you keep it in art. In free ports, there are 55 free ports in the world. In Geneva free port, you have a sculpture valued at $3 million. You just put it in the next room, you have transferred $3 million, no references made. So the art market works on what is principle called fencing. So they keep it there for 10 years, 20 years.
Till you want to park your...
Yeah, till public memory is also lost so that they don't recognize icons. So that is how the international opinion changed. And at the same time, we had a much more receptive where I think the misconception is like the first time I saw Angela Merkel gifting the Tengupura Durga from Kashmir. And I opposed the use of the word gift because it was not a gift. You gift what you own. This was a restitution. This was a stolen property that was handed over, and this was stolen by Kapoor. And that is where I started looking at Kashmir artifacts in the US. And you'll be shocked to know the Metropolitan Museum, which is the most premier museum, acquired over 200 Kashmiri artifacts between 1980 and 1995, which was the high point of terrorism there, and you know where the money would have gone, and they still continue to hold it. They still continue to display it. So all these things came together, and it was now no longer fashionable to sit on paperwork. And it was the officer, for example, who brought back the Oma from Singapore got a promotion. So small things happened, and DRI also incentivized their officers. We worked with the DRI to basically put it as one of the
DRI's
Department of Revenue Intelligence. So all this came together, and I'll give you the good number. So right now we are in 2024, 10 years. Physically, what has come back to India, we have got about 635 objects.
Within this
10-year period.
10 years,
And during the same period, from 2016, we've been offered 1,835 plus 435, about 2,200 objects from the US, which are on various stages of coming back. Again, some bureaucratic red tape continues to exist. But I'm happy that the numbers now are growing, substantiating my claim that we are losing objects by the thousands. So we are managing to get back hardly 3 to 4% of the loot. The network still exists. We have only got back one dealer, and the US is going after 3 more dealers. We are in a network. So we have just touched 3 dealers. We've got back over 2,400. So that is one good aspect. Plus, in the last few years, at 7 cases in Europe, we've had good faith purchases coming up, voluntarily giving up objects. And we're working with, like, there is a company called my good friends, Art Recovery International. They recover art, but this they do pro bono for us. They were in a party outside of London when they saw this, to quote, grotesque-looking statue, which he calls up and says can only be from India. And this was a yogini from UP that we have been searching from 1980. And she's there as garden furniture, left abandoned. We managed to get her back to India. Now, this year, we've got 2 more back from the same recovery company, which Dr. Jaishankar got back in the UK a couple of months back. So we've done that in Italy, we've done that in Amsterdam, where we are encouraging people to say that, look, you've bought it in good faith, you're not involved in the crime, but you have got a stolen object, do the good thing, return objects back. So that is also catching up in a big way. We've also worked with the EAC to come up with a white paper, like our recommendations to the Indian government. Small things like stop the export of broken and mutilated antiquities or replicas, because that's where the art market fudges. So they show newly made object, they export an original antiquity. So we said, if you want to export brand new, don't with any breakage. So these are small things.
Okay.
Incentivize finders. Like I told you, a lot of buried hoods. The actual guy who's finding it is getting for the weight 5,000, 6,000 rupees. If we incentivize, so we have made a recommendation.
Okay.
Direct Debrois or Sanjeev Sanya all helped us with that white paper. It's been presented to Parliament. Parliament has appointed JPC.
Okay.
JPC has come up with a 300-page report.
So it's in that process.
A lot of things in India. We are hopeful after the G20. I think we will sign the Unitroid Convention of 1995 because the UN 1970 Convention does not cover private property. It only covers state property. So we would be signing the Unitroid Convention. In 2016, I had advocated for a cultural policy MOU with the US, which temporarily bans import of cultural property from India. I understand that the hearing is going to come up now. India is going to sign. So the things are positive. But what is the need of the hour is to do our job. This is not our job. It's the job of a central art crime unit. We need a central art crime unit which can do this not in spare time like us. And we will be happy to not only us, Italy example is offered to train this, if it's a national force, with their management systems.
Right.
And we will be happy to curate such an effort.
Okay. Can you sum up? Because, this data is so obviously glaring in terms of how many artifacts we've received, gotten back prior to 2014 and then up till now. And then, of course, there's great work by, I won't even call you an art enthusiast, you're more than that, but volunteers like you who are really, are on this mission. But if you were to sum up Prime Minister Modi's impact on the change in environment for getting such artifacts and antiquities back, like how has Prime Minister Modi changed the way India looks at supporting volunteers like you who are working on this important mission?
Honestly, we could have done more. I think there's a lot more stuff that the PMO had to focus on to give due credit. There's a lot of good that's happened, which was probably on a top priority.
Yeah.
But you look at it on the ground, officers are being empowered to do the right thing. And I think that is where the first thing has happened. Earlier, papers wouldn't just move, and there was an attempt to always derail. There was never an attempt to encourage. So we never sued. We always lost cases. We have lost hundreds of cases in India on Antiquities Act. And there was actually an attempt by the collecting lobby to dilute the already toothless Antiquities Act, which thankfully has been stopped by this establishment government. Going forward, to put it in numbers, the numbers speak. 19, 0, 635, 2000 plus. So that's...
Give me the timeline
1970 to 2000 is 19, 2000 2012 0, 2014 to 2024 635. This year, hopefully, again, the red tape needs to be speeded up. When I say red tape, let me explain. Like other countries, including Nepal, Cambodia, when they have a seizure, they have the wherewithal to get it back within months. Whereas India wants to fly officers from the ASI to do a physical inspection to New York, and it takes about 6-7 trips for them over 3-4 years because they don't have the budgets to stay long to even clear 100 objects. So our recommendation is get it back here, do whatever you want to do here. So if that happens, we would cross 2,500 this year. Hopefully that's the target. That was my New Year resolution.
2,000 artifacts, antiquities back to
2,000 restored objects back.
Okay.
And I think what is interesting is, especially with the happenings this week, India has become more forceful in its international approach. The soft diplomacy hasn't worked, especially in our field, wherein we've been requesting, even with proof, saying, please give, please give, please give. The top museums are obliging after 6-7 years. The auction houses care a damn. So what we need to do is we need to take an example from either Italy or even when I say smaller countries, no, you don't expect Nepal or Cambodia to outperform. Cambodia has brought back 4,000 objects. Nepal has brought back 2,600 objects in the same period. And that is because, they have a much shorter history of theft. because Nepal opened up only in the 80s, so it's much more documented. Cambodia, it's again the Khmer Rouge people look at it like blood antiquities, real blood antiquities they want to give back. But Cambodia, what they're doing, they're encouraging litigation in the US, in Europe against auction houses. And I firmly believe that in this new avatar, India would become, we should pass the onus or burden of proof on the seller to say that this is Indian art. Show me how have you obtained it.
You prove how you got it. Do you think, since you're talking about the undercurrent of the attitude that Indian diplomacy has, do you think that in the Modi era, the way Indian diplomacy has also evolved to, being able to call spade a spade and to be able to stand up for itself?
I think it's
does that impact work like this?
Yeah, I think it definitely does, because India is no longer considered an also ran. The trade deals are big, so countries know that they can't offend India. So provided the proof, they are better off being friends. So that's what you have seen with Germany. That's what you have seen with France. In the US, for example,
that these countries prefer being at a friendly turf with India.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that way. When I say this is stolen objects, there should be no other reason than the fact that it's a stolen object to return back.
True.
But then if diplomacy can hasten the process, well and good. But I think that shouldn't stop us from taking the fight legally for people who are abusing our friendship.
Right.
That is where I think we will take the next step when we come to it.
Okay. Another question. In your work all these years, do you have any particular memory? Or rather, let me put it this way. Have you found Prime Minister Modi personally sort of passionate about this work of bringing back our heritage home?
That's why I said when he looks at an antiquity, he doesn't look at it as an antiquity. He looks at it as a Murti. And that you can see from how he looks at objects. And I think that is what the leader does, that gets percolates down the order. And I think the more he does, the more is bound to happen. And the very fact that, like, I still remember in June 2016, when the big handover was happening in the US. And that was fresh off Deen Dayalan's arrest in Chennai. So Deen Dayalan's network was being there. So Prime Minister Modi is in the US, and it was a program that he wanted. So traditionally, these restitutions would be like one ceremony happening somewhere.
Okay.
There was not even a ceremony, quiet handovers. It was under Prime Minister Modi that this became a event. Okay, some people call it photo op, but it is a sign not just to the outside world, but also to his officers that the Prime Minister is showing importance in this, and it is of his interest. And that is the reason why officers of DRI, earlier they were interested in bullion or other smuggling. They know that now the Prime Minister's focus is on Murti Chori as well. So I think this is a big change that's happened on the ground. People are more receptive, and earlier it was one joker sitting in Singapore wasting our time. And now people, when we send our inputs, we are taken seriously. And I would say that the very good officers in the government, which was lacking before, in the Economic Advisory Council, especially Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, Bidek Debroy, and then they put us on to officers, cadres who help us out, because it's literally looking at a needle in a haystack, and you have to go through a lot of let's say red tape to pick up an FIR from 1968, 1970.
Go back to the records.
And when the request comes from them, work gets done. And because they are also interested in this cause, and thanks for Sanjeev, for example, to leave a very lucrative banking career to come into this. And I think more such people in the force would ideally become your core of your Central Art Crime Squad.
Right.
People who understand and appreciate the value of history would know more about these Murtis and the struggles.
Right.
So I'll give you just one example, the last example. So right now I'm battling a very curious case of a Vishnuga Murti that was in erstwhile East Bengal. In 1946, the entire village moved from East Bengal during partition to Orissa, settled there. When they came, they brought that murti with them.
ठीक है.
This murti was stolen in 2004 from the temple, caught in the India-Bangladesh border by Bangladesh Border Security Force, is currently in Dhaka. So now, does history belong to geography or history belong to community? I firmly believe history belongs to community in this case because it is linked with faith. And this is where I think the soft diplomacy and the Prime Minister's attention would help restoring faith.
Right.
And we see a lot of these murtis going back to active worship. And that is another thing that never happened before.
Okay.
So these murtis would go to storage. They would be in police stations for evidence for months together. But now we see a lot of these murtis, like you've seen the Annapurni from Canada, going back
To Banaras.
to
Yes.
Banaras. So these are things that reimpose to the local communities that these idols are fit for worship. They can go back to active. So a lot of people seeing that, they come to us and say, hey, my murti was stolen in 1970. Can you
Right.
help find out?
Right.
So earlier they felt that it cannot be solved, and now they see these successes.
That it can be done. Yeah.
And they see a prime minister receiving objects,
Hmm.
receiving something that was stolen in 1978, 1976. And that's the importance that the PMO gives for these, and it's not some random event. There's a proper booklet that's prepared, and a lot of things are happening.
We've spoken about the government, we've spoken about government leadership, spoken about sort of focused, dedicated work that I would call you a practical researcher like you who does. Talking about people, because I think the last point you made that, somebody who sees on TV Prime Minister Modi receiving a murti that might have been stolen back in 1978, and he might be a priest and now wants to sort of, come forward and say कि मेरी भी मूर्ति कभी चुरी थी and आप उसको ढूंढ के लेकर आइए. Talking of people in the last leg, do you think it's also a matter of change in civilizational pride? Because it does come back to people, right? Like how proud are they about... We've seen an era where, khandaharon mein and old monuments, people would just, take a chalk, take a stone and scribble their name away, make hearts or something. And then today, have you seen a change in the way people perceive or respect their own heritage?
First of all, the faith has always remained. And I take this example. I got a lead in Delhi of a UNESCO conference, an ASA officer from West Bengal. He said, मेरा PhD का guide का PhD thesis में एक मूर्ति था, and that was stolen. Can you find it? And this was this photograph, half of that picture of a Kubera that was stolen from West Bengal. So I managed to track it to a US dealer. We've seized the object. So I go to the site because I want to see this place. I drive 4 hours from Calcutta. Boondocks place, small village, and then 3 kilometers away from this village is a small temple. As we are parking, sound of a bell. Puja ho raha hai.
Achha.
And there's a priest there. 1 banana, 1 small bowl of rice, and 3 paintings on the wall of the stolen murtis. That means I have to find 2 more. But I think this is the faith. And if that priest had known that we were there as an organization, he would have reached out to us earlier. And if the government can, like the Prime Minister has spoken about this in Man Ki Baat, we need to spread out the word that please come up and report thefts. And please come up to receive our stolen murtis. Because a lot of the time, people are afraid. We bring back objects, but there are no claimants.
Okay.
They're scared to claim because then, but those questions should be asked. All these murtis should go to Bihar, should go to Andhra Pradesh, should go to West Bengal, where people should ask the question that how come they left India? You have never been telling us. So I think that is where I think the faith aspect comes in, the question of restoring national pride, saying that our murtis are not objects that you can plunder and sell. And lastly, the thing is, what great king's history lies buried, we don't know. By allowing these smugglers to do illicit excavations, like there's a site called Chandraketugarh in West Bengal. It's been plundered. It was officially excavated only in 1968. I don't know how many people know Shunga dynasty, a great dynasty. Every museum in the world has artifacts from the Shunga dynasty, terracotta rattles.
Yes.
But technically, not even one should have left India because it was excavated only in 1968, which is the UN Convention date close. Now, when the robbers dig, they will take what is sellable. They will throw anything that is non-sellable, which means any pottery shard inscription. Number two, when the moment they do illicit dig, a historically significant object loses context. It becomes a doll.
Right.
It loses its historical significance. So today in the northeast or in the south, we still don't know what rulers are there because it's all buried.
Yeah.
So I think what we should do at a national level, I think with hopefully another 5-year term, I think we should become more aggressive in claiming back and also going after the networks, making sure that the different players in the network, because my friend in the US, again law enforcement, he said, you should not happy with just Murtis returning. The arrests have to also happen. We need to go after each of these, the intermediaries in Hong Kong, who are basically transferring via Hawala the money required for these guys. We have to go after the customs officers who have signed these shipping bills knowing well that these are Murtis. We have allowed customs officers allowed these Murtis covered in dirt and soil to leave our shores. We've got restorers in UK, we've got shipping guys everywhere. So India has to form and support a larger international network.
Go after the entire value chain of the racket. Exactly. Yeah. One other side question. Is Prime Minister Modi, is the government only after Hindu Murtis? Like, are we only talking about...
I think, personally for me, I don't look at it with a colored lens at all. For me, it is a shared heritage of this great land. We have got back Buddhist icons, we've got back a lot of Jain Murtis, we've got back an Islamic standard from the Nizam. So for me, we have taken like Indus seals, Harappan era, Indo-Gangetic plain, prehistoric, Bhuta mask that are... for me, we don't see it, and I don't see any difference in how the PMO or the Ministry of Culture or the MEA or Indian High Commissions handle our requests differently. So I think at that level, at the leadership level, it is looked at our ancestral treasures, and I firmly believe that it is our sacred duty to protect and hand over the next generation. We are temporary custodians of this great heritage, great land. And we are the vehicles. I think the gods want to come home. They pick the choose and the time and the vehicle. My only request to your viewers is that if you have time, do these 3 things. Please visit your Kuladevatas. Footfall stops robbery. So if you go to your village, please visit your temples. If they allow photography, photograph them.
Okay.
If not, ask them to photograph and keep 1 copy with them, 1 copy with the police station. If there are any thefts that their fathers or some village elder says, report it, record it. You can reach out to us through our Twitter handle. Finally, whenever somebody is traveling outside of India, you see our object for sale, don't put yourself up for risk. If they allow photography, take photographs and send it to us. If not, just tell us that this shop in Paris or this shop in UK is selling this, and we have our informants to go and take photograph. And this is what we request people. So we will definitely act on it.
Wow. I think we will then end at this note. As Vijay told us, do visit your Kuladevata if you can photograph them, or ask the priest to keep up some sort of documentation of the Murti, of the deity. If you're traveling in foreign locations, do report to the authorities, to India Pride Project if you find that it's an Indian Murti that might be possibly part of any illegal or, such a trafficking racket. So with that, I think it's been a great journey for me. And I can all say that, I can possibly only say that Bring Your Gods Back Home looks like a beautiful, I would say, divine initiative where government has been working hand in hand with passionate volunteers like Mr. Vijay and their team across the world to bring our heritage back home. So with this message, stay safe, stay healthy, and go and visit your Kuladevata today. Thank you so much.